the Divorced Girl Smiling Podcast with your host, Jackie Pilosoff.
No one should have to go through a divorce feeling alone and isolated. The Divorced Girl Smiling Podcast is a production of Divorced Girl Smiling, where every show is 30 minutes aimed to empower you, help you feel validated and understood, and connect you with some of the best divorce professionals in the industry. So grab a cup of coffee or a glass of wine and start smiling as you join us right now for the Divorced Girl Smiling Podcast. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found and always at divorcedgirlsmiling.com. Before we get started, I want to tell you about a wonderful company that you can go to if you're thinking of selling your wedding rings after divorce. The name of the company is MJ Gable. The founders of the company are Matt and Ann Gable, who I have known since 2011 when I sold my wedding rings to them. I found them online, I didn't know them, and what I found was that it was a great experience. And since then, their company has grown tremendously. They're really honest. They're such wonderful people, ethical, so much integrity. They're smart. They know the value. I just had a wonderful experience, and I know you will too. If you want to learn more, you can find them at mjgable.com. You can also find them in the Trusted Professional section of Divorced Girl Smiling. I also want to tell you about a really good financial advisor named Luke Sauter. Luke is the CEO of his company, Videro Investment Advisors. He's a personal financial specialist and an investment advisor. And Luke spent about 15 years working as a corporate finance executive for a Fortune 500 company. Luke is really smart. He has a desire to help people during complex times of life, which obviously includes divorce, but also job changes, retirement, and Luke's wonderful. If you want to learn more about Luke, you can find him at videro.com, and you can also find him in the Trusted Professional section of Divorced Girl Smiling. When I was getting divorced, I had never heard the term equitable distribution. And that was something that would come up a lot in my divorce and comes up in every divorce. So we're going to dedicate this whole podcast to talking about what equitable distribution means, what's fair, what's 50-50, how these are all different. And then we're going to talk about property that is considered in divorce proceedings and how to avoid litigation, and then how to get a motion for equitable distribution. So I think it's going to be a great conversation, and you're going to learn a lot if you are at the beginning of your divorce, or even if you're in the middle of it. This is going to be extremely helpful. I have a great guest. His name is John McKnight, and John is a divorce attorney in Raleigh, North Carolina. He's the founder of his firm, McKnight Law, and he's been practicing for 22 years. So I'm sure he knows a lot about equitable distribution. Hi, John.
Hi, Jackie. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for being on the show. Really appreciate the time. So, do you think that it was unusual, or do you think that everybody who's going through a divorce has never heard the term equitable distribution? And tell me what that means.
Sure. Great question. Most people that walk in the door to talk to me um, hear a lot of jargon. They've been on the internet a little bit. Maybe they've met with somebody before. And even when they start talking to me, I have to be careful about kind of the words I use because, like you said, for 22 years, I've been saying things like equitable distribution. And I have to recognize that when the people come in and sit down with me, they may not know, what that means. It's a legal term. It's a term of art that lawyers and judges know what it means. And essentially, anytime you're talking about equitable distribution, you're talking about dividing the marital estate. And that's another term of art. Sometimes people kind of cock their heads when I say that. What does that mean, marital estate? Essentially, a shorthand way of thinking about it is everything that has come into the marriage since the date of marriage and through the date of separation. And that's generally the basket of things that a court would say, these are the things that I need to equitably distribute. And so that right there is a clue to what the term means. It is a way for a court to fairly divide up the assets and debts that have come into the marriage since the date of the marriage.
Okay, now I always assumed when I heard equitable distribution that it meant 50-50, and that is not the case, correct?
That is not the case, correct. It would be called 50-50 distribution if that's what, they wanted to call it, but equitable, means fair. I mean, that's the meaning of the word, fair. Equity, it's an expansion of the word equity, and so equitable distribution means fair distribution.
Fair in whose mind? The
Yeah.
judges, the law, the court? Because if you ask one lawyer what they think is fair, they're going to say something different than the other attorney. Same with the couple getting divorced, right?
Of course, right, and that can be one of the challenges, especially early on in your relationship with your lawyer. That can be one of the challenges that you have to sort through because, um, all marriages are different. They all look different. We all kind of have a picture in our head of marriages and what they're like, and we kind of all think that they're all basically the same. But I can tell you, having represented thousands of people over the years, they are all different. And so, um, how things come into the marriage and what things come into the marriage, often determine how those things are going to get distributed. Okay. And so you may have somebody who is a very high earner, superstar, high earner, makes a ton of money. Um, and you may have somebody else that is just an extremely accomplished artist or provides some other kind of enormous value to the marriage, but isn't expressed in dollars and cents.
Or a stay-at-home mom who has raised the children,
That could be what
or
happened.
maybe someone who has a low-paying job, but it's meaningful and they love it. So, okay. So, let's get into this. These are factors to consider with equitable distribution, and as John just said, the first one is income. What are some other factors that are considered when we're talking about what a judge or what a mediator is gonna think is equitable?
Yeah. So from state to state, it's going to be different. But in North Carolina, there is some case law that's developed that it's called the McLean presumptions that say that you generally somewhere around a 50-50 split is going to be in the neighborhood of equitable. There's some case law that's not in the general statutes, it's in the case law interpreting the general statutes that say that. But you're right, there are other factors. And so it is definitely the case that in some marriages you will have a person who is not faithful to the marriage, who does a lot of uh, detrimental things financially. Let's not just only talk about emotionally, but does some financially detrimental things to the marriage. I think we could agree that if somebody sneaks off to Vegas for a week every month and blows $25,000 at the blackjack table, the marriage isn't benefiting from that at all. And so there are factors like that, what somebody has done to preserve the assets in the marriage, what somebody has done to increase the value of the assets in the marriage. A party's, like you mentioned, a party's shouldering the burdens at home, certainly taking care, as I said, could be more important than raising minor children. And so if the evidence shows that one person is doing everything, they're doing all the dentist visits and buying all the groceries and the clothes and et cetera, then I mean that could be an outsized contribution to the marriage that may justify moving off of this McLean presumption of a 50-50 split.
Okay, I'm gonna stop you because I have a question.
Sure.
So basically, you're trying to be really politically correct and like, I'm gonna just call it out. So if somebody's cheating, I know many states are no fault, so that doesn't play into the divorce. But let's say somebody's cheating and they're taking their person they're cheating with on these elaborate vacations. That's going to come into play, right?
Yes, right, and
Yeah.
so, it gets a little bit, so North Carolina is one of these no-fault states, and so it can get a little bit, murky there about, are we punishing the cheating because that's not allowed, but are we punishing or accounting for, maybe more accurate to say, this again, just like the Vegas analogy, spending this money, if you're out
Right.
and you're spending money on your paramour or this person that you're with, that doesn't benefit the marriage at all, and so why should that be counted against the other spouse in a division of assets?
Okay. Now I'm going to just kind of tell you what I'm hearing here. So if somebody's blowing money on gambling, they have an addiction, or they're blowing money on alcohol and they're excessively drinking, or they're going out all the time, or they're just a bad spender, or, they're doing something irresponsible, then that's taken into consideration. The other factors that we haven't talked about with equitable distribution are like the health and the age of the spouses. Do they have the ability to work? Because I know a lot of women who were ordered by the court to go back to work, and it was a very big, like, ouchie for them. But it ended up being the best thing that ever happened to them because years later, they'll say, "I'm so glad that happened. I'm so much happier." So they were just forced out of their comfort zone, and many, many wonderful things come from going back to work. But tell me, your experience with
Sure,
people being able to work.
certainly. For all kinds of reasons, a person whose marriage is ending may not have immediate access to the workforce. One could be that they've been out of the workforce for a long time, maybe raising a family. I see a lot of what are called gray divorces, people who are older, um, uh, and for whatever reason are splitting up. And so those can absolutely be factors. And one of the factors in North Carolina that's specifically um, listed as far as distribution of a big asset, the marital residence, could be the need of that party to stay in the house with the minor children to continue to raise them. And there's this other financial piece of divorce is spousal support, that we kind of do around the same time. And so technically, at least in North Carolina, equitable distribution, there are these factors about, needing the house, to live. Maybe if you're older, needing the house to raise minor children because that's the house that they're used to. We view, at least in North Carolina, spousal support as more of the mechanism to rehabilitate a spouse. I guess is the way to say that. If they've been out of the workforce for a long time, or if they are, in the case of gray divorces, maybe too advanced in age to go back to school or whatever it is, learn a trade, all that kind of stuff. And so spousal support would be the thing that we use in those instances to sort of make up the gap. Although we do have some room inside of the equitable distribution statute and the case law interpreting it to move the needle off of 50-50 in those instances.
Wow. Okay. So, and if somebody maybe has a health condition or a mental health condition and they just can't work yet, maybe they're working towards it, or maybe the plan is to never work again. So,
Yeah.
all these things come into play. Okay. We have to go to a break. And I want to tell everyone you're listening to the Divorced Girl Smiling podcast. My name is Jackie Pilosoff. I'm your host. I'm here today with divorce attorney John McKnight in Raleigh, North Carolina. John has been a divorce attorney for 22 years. He and I are talking about equitable distribution, what it is, factors considered. And we're after the break, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about avoiding litigation, and then how to get a motion for equitable distribution. And then we're going to talk about injunction relief, but I have no idea what that is. But I will be asking John after the break. So we'll be right back. I want to tell you about two Divorce Girl Smiling trusted professionals who I think are wonderful. The first one is Sherry Morris, who is a high conflict and co-parenting coach. She's the founder of Dear Divorce Coach and the creator of her co-parenting course online called Co-Parenting Compass. Now, I've known Sherry for a few years. She has the best reputation in the coaching industry. She's been doing it for a very long time. She went through a divorce, and her specialties are high conflict. Whether you see her to learn how to co-parent better with a difficult parent, or just to figure out what you want your life to look like during and after divorce, Sherry's wonderful. You can find Sherry at deardivorcecoach.com. I also want to tell you about a highly regarded Fort Worth family law firm named Varghese Somerset. I personally know Turner Thornton, who is the head of the divorce division at Varghese Somerset, and he's great. We've done so many podcasts together. I've known him for a few years, and just a class act, really knows what he's doing. Very good reputation. They handle complex, high asset divorce. If you want to learn more about Varghese Somerset, you can find them at versustexas.com. And you can also find both Varghese Somerset and Sherry Morris in the Trusted Professional section of Divorced Girl Smiling. Welcome back to the Divorced Girl Smiling podcast. My name is Jackie Pilosoff, and I'm your host. And today we're talking about equitable distribution in a divorce, what it is, factors considered. And my guest is John McKnight of McKnight Law. And if you want to learn more about John, you can go to mcknightlawyers.com. He practices in North Carolina. He's been doing it for 22 years. He litigates and tries to get cases reconciled with mediation as well. Okay, John, let's move on to 3 types of property when you're in a divorce proceeding. And a lot of people know this. There's separate property, marital property, and divisible property. But what's the difference between marital property and divisible property?
Right. So if you could imagine, I'll do very quickly, separate property is property that you owned before the marriage. And then marital property, as we've discussed, is the stuff that comprises the marital estate, all the assets and debts that have come into the marriage since the date of the marriage. Um, but, things aren't as cut and dried as that. And so sometimes people, let's imagine, um, somebody owns a little house and they've had it, maybe their parents gave it to them, or they it was their first house they bought after they graduated from college, and they didn't get married till a little bit later in life, and then they get married, and then they move to the house together, and then they add on to the house, and so the house has this kind of mixed nature to it, right? There's a part of the house, the value of the house that existed before the marriage, and then there's a part of the house that is definitely marital property, the improvements that they made to the house, and that's a little bit of a tricky one because you can convert separate property into marital property, and the classic way to do that is with a marital residence. But a different example would be an investment fund that you may own, and so you may have $100,000 invested in that fund before the marriage, and then during the marriage, you guys invest another 500,000. Well, it would be fairly easy to go back and say that as of the date of the marriage, this is separate property, and then the 500,000 put in during the marriage is marital property. And then if you look at it all together as a whole, that would be called divisible property. And so these are just some
Oh,
terminology that courts would use to say, well, this is what it is, but it's made up of these different components.
okay, good. Great to know. Now, I want to get your opinion on this. For people listening, let's say you're a big earner, okay? You men and women. You're the earner, you're killing it at work, you're doing great. Many people will say, I'm going to wait till my kids go to college to get divorced. It's only 7 years. Okay, now let's put aside the fact that nobody should have to live miserably for 7 years. And I don't believe that, even though I never judge people, but I think that's crazy. Uh, Um, but the other thing people don't realize is that in those 7 years, If you're making $300,000 a year at your job, that's all going to be marital property. If you get out earlier, you don't have to split that or have that be part of the marital assets, right? I mean,
That's absolutely right, and that's a thing that, I will say I've represented a lot of high earning women and men, and it is the kind of thing that by the time it gets to them sitting down here with me, they kind of you can see in their face, like, "I wish I had a time machine," because they do that for whatever reason, and it's again, let's don't judge people, but for whatever reason, momentum is easier than doing something about it. And so they kind of you get into this thing like it's just easier to keep going to work and it's just and then you're right, 7, 8, 10 years go by and it's not just the value of your house, but it's your 401k. It's the gains, the market gains on your retirement account. It's all of it is growing and you may have, you alluded to earlier, a bad acting spouse. Maybe they have an addiction that they won't treat. Maybe they are cheating. Maybe they're doing some things outside the marriage. If you tolerate it for that long, a court's not going to jump in and say, well, 7 years ago, they started acting bad. The court's going to say, you, for whatever reason, stayed with them for 7, 10 years. I don't know why you did it. I don't want to know why you did it. You did stay with them for that time. And so I'm going to split everything up. If
okay, now, John, another reason people decide to stay together is because they feel so guilty about the kids. And they say, well, I just got to get these kids launched out of the house and then I'll go because I don't want to do this to my kids. And I really want people to know this. I am not trying to sell you on divorce. I am a huge fan of marriage. I love happily married couples. I believe in happiness, whether that means divorce or being single or being with somebody. But your kids in those 7 years that you wait are going to be subjected for 7 more years to a loveless marriage, to seeing you unhappy, to maybe seeing your spouse's addiction and you putting up with this. So you're not doing them any favors by staying. But again, everybody has to weigh their situation. But I guess my advice would be talk to divorce professionals so that you can make the right decision. And then if you still want to stay for the 7 years until the kids go to college, then you've educated yourself and then you can make a better decision. That's why I created Divorce Girl Smiling so you could have consults with mediators, divorce lawyers, financial advisors, divorce real estate experts, mortgage lending people. And then you have all this information. And then you have the knowledge to say, okay, is it better to wait? And therapists because emotionally too. So I just want people to know I really am a fan of marriage if it's the right situation and the both people are happy and healthy.
I agree, and I mean, I do wanna jump in on this a little bit if you'll allow it, and people say that a lot, like, "I want to get through the next X number of years for the kids," and I believe them when they say that, but I do think having access to resources who can talk to you about that, about is this really in the best interest of the kids, is a valuable thing, because I have seen over the past 22 years, I've seen in my own life, we tend to what is modeled for us while we are children, has a profound effect on our first few relationships. And so if dysfunction is modeled for you, if an unhealthy relationship is modeled for you, it's my experience that you are much more likely to get into one of those relationships because it looks and feels so familiar. And so this thing that you think you're doing for your kids can come back to hurt your kids. You may be modeling something for them and they may not know what they're doing. They may not quite understand it when they're in their 20s, what exactly is happening to them, but they may be doing something that looks and feels familiar because that's what was modeled for them for the past 7, 8, 10 years of their life.
I love that you said that, and I wanna tell my listeners, personally, I got divorced when my kids were 3 and 5, and they're now 21 and 23, and they are great kids because they grew up with stability instead of 2 parents who there was bad behavior, we didn't get along, and if we would have stayed and they grew up in that toxic environment, I truly believe they would be different kids.
Yeah, no question.
Okay, John, let's move on to how does somebody get a motion for equitable distribution? And then what is an injunction relief?
Sure. So, ideally, you would not go to court for equitable distribution. It is a messy, long process, and it is. We've been married for 18 years, and what's this bank account, and how much is in it, and how much was in it on the date of separation, and who spent this, and how much is this worth, and let's appraise the house, and what about the jewelry, and all this. And so, ideally, you would find a way to. Get a lawyer and help you work through all these things and find a way to settle it. But sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes these marriages end, and one person wants it in, and the other person does not, and so sometimes you do not have the ability to settle a case. And in that instance, that is what the court is for. That is why we have courts in this country, as a backstop when people are not able to get things worked out on their own. Then you go to a lawyer. You say, I'm not able to get this worked out on my own. What do I do? How do I get my value out of the house? How do I get this 401k divided? How do I move on? This person wants to keep me here forever, and I need to move on, and I cannot settle with them. And then your lawyer will say, okay, there are laws in every single one of the 50 states that tell you how to draft a claim. It could be a motion, it could be a complaint for equitable distribution. And it's a regular old lawsuit. You file it. It is you versus your spouse, and you file it and serve it just like you would any other lawsuit, and then begins a very long and paperwork intensive process of trying to figure out what the value of all this stuff is and giving the court enough information so that the court can divide it.
Okay, so basically what you're telling me is you don't want to do a motion for equitable distribution. You want to have your attorney help you and or get a mediator and possibly a financial advisor to figure all this stuff out for you so that you can just go into the judge and say, here's what we've agreed upon, or here's what I would like, without the judge saying, well, let's figure out this and this, because then all that does is rack up attorney's fees and 3 years go by and you're still not divorced.
Right, and a judge, bless them, but they, don't always get it right, and you're leaving all of this up to a third person to decide, and if they get it wrong, then you're left with a lengthy appeals process, and so there's a lot to be gained in, getting a good lawyer, getting a good mediator, and getting, these things settled without having to go to court.
Okay, now I kind of read ahead in your article and I now know what injunction relief is.
Right.
So, what happens when somebody is afraid that the other party is going to, right at the beginning of the divorce, either hide money, spend a ton because they're like, well, I'm going to lose it anyway, or whatever? Is that what that is? You can go, like, is that freezing your assets?
That's freezing assets essentially, and so divorces are can be messy and emotional, and especially right at that split up, especially right when the split happens is when the wild things happen. And so it is definitely the case that there have been a lot of instances where one party, for revenge, spite, anger, all the things that we feel when a relationship is ending, says, well, if I'm not going to get it, then you're not either. And then I mean, I keep mentioning Vegas. I'm not trying to plug Vegas, but why not? Why wouldn't I take this, $500,000 and go out to Vegas and just, I mean, blow it, right? And then it's gone. You can't have it. It's gone. And if you really think that that's going to happen, if you're in a situation with an unstable person and they're going to burn the house down or they're going to spend all the money or whatever, then injunctive relief in the form of a temporary restraining order, followed by a preliminary injunction, would be appropriate in your case. And that would say to the court, hey, there's a real danger here that you won't have a marital estate to divide. There won't be anything there. And so, in order to preserve the status quo and to protect the rights of the parties and protect them from irreparable harm, let's freeze everything and say no. Do not spend down your 401k. Do not take money out of this account Do not burn down the house. We need that to divide later on. It's rare. It's rare that a judge is going to do something like that. You've got to have everyone wants to do it. Everyone wants injunctive relief, like freeze, stop, nobody, spend any more money. Um, but there are certainly cases where a spouse is unstable, and there's a real danger of that.
And here's the reason why most people don't have to do it. Tell me if I'm right, John. Because you can provide your lawyer, mediator, or the judge, if need be, with proof of what was in the account when you got separated. You can show a statement. You can take a screenshot of the account, let's say on July 15th when your ex moved out. And then the person might have to pay that money back. Or if the person did withdraw a large amount, that'll be factored into the equitable distribution.
That's absolutely right. And say what you will about the internet age and all that kind of stuff, but it's not like the early '90s or anything like that. You can w- absolutely get a snapshot of what was in the marital estate on the date of separation. You can get it fast. You can get it. I mean, it used to be you have to send off to the bank for all this stuff, and then 6 to 8 weeks they'll send it to you. Not anymore. It's all on the computer, and so yeah, you can get a snapshot of what's in the marital estate on the date of separation, and that's what a judge needs to divide it. And again, another important point here is it's important to think about equitable distribution is not we're not dividing every single thing. We're not taking a chainsaw and cutting the couch in half and cutting the car in half and cutting the floor. It's we're moving these big pieces over to each side, and we're trying not to cut many things in half. And then hopefully they balance out at the end. And maybe if we need to cut one thing in half to do it, we can do that at the end. So you're right. If somebody says, "Well, I'm going to spend everything in bank account A," then the court could say, "Okay, great. That's fine that you did that. You took that. That's in your column, and I'm going to give your spouse bank account B, all of it." And we're not dividing that. So injunctive relief it's not a common remedy. It is rarely needed, but when you do need it, you need it.
John, thank you so much for being on the show. This was extremely informative. I think people got a lot out of it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
If you want to talk to John, have a consult, or learn more, you can find John at McKnightLawyers.com. You can also find McKnight Law in the trusted professional section of Divorced Girl Smiling, which is divorcedgirlsmiling.com. And you can go there to listen to more podcasts, read articles, or sign up for my free consult where we talk for 30 minutes. It's all confidential. You tell me what you need, what's going on, and I will connect you with professionals who I think are the best fit for you. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. We'll talk to you real soon.